I rented a cabin to be alone, then another man unlocked the door. The first thing I heard was a key turning in the cabin door. I had been there for 3 hours. My groceries were in the refrigerator, my laptop was shut for the first time in months, and according to the confirmation email on my phone, I had rented the place alone until Friday. Then the door opened. A man about my age stepped inside carrying a suitcase. He stopped when he saw me. I stopped when I saw his key. "I think you're in my cabin," he said. I held up my phone. That's interesting because I was about to say exactly the same thing. His name was Ali. And 5 days later, sharing that cabin was going to be the least complicated thing between us. I had booked the place because I wanted 5 days during which nobody could ask me for anything. That was the version I had given my sister. She had called it a vacation. I had called it preventative maintenance. For the previous 14 months, I had worked as a project manager for a small architecture firm that had somehow turned every deadline into an emergency and every emergency into a group chat. I was 31 years old and had recently discovered that being dependable was a compliment people gave you right before handing you something they didn't want to deal with. I answered emails while eating breakfast. I answered messages while waiting for coffee. Once during a dentist appointment, I had dictated revisions to a contractor while somebody's hand was inside my mouth. My dentist had eventually taken my phone away. That should have been the warning. Instead, I kept going until one Thursday afternoon when my boss asked whether I could quickly take ownership of a project I had never seen before. I stared at the message for almost a minute. Then I closed my laptop. Not professionally. Just literally. I shut it. My sister Rachel had been telling me for months that I needed to disappear for a few days. So I booked a small cabin outside a town called Bellwether, 2 hours north of the city. The listing promised quiet lake access, a fireplace, 2 bedrooms, and unreliable cell service. The last feature was the selling point. I arrived Monday afternoon. The cabin was smaller than the photographs suggested but better for it. Dark cedar siding. A narrow porch facing the lake. A kitchen with old white cabinets and a window above the sink. 2 bedrooms separated by a short hallway. A stone fireplace that looked as if it had survived several architectural trends by refusing to participate in any of them. I unpacked. Put my phone on silent. Placed my laptop inside my suitcase. Then put the suitcase in the bedroom closet. This felt theatrical. I enjoyed it. I made pasta. Opened a bottle of sparkling water. Sat at the kitchen table. And at 7:12, somebody unlocked the front door. The man standing in the doorway had dark hair pushed back from his forehead, a short beard, and the expression of somebody whose brain had reached the same conclusion as mine and rejected it. He looked at my plate. Then at the overnight bag beside the couch. Then back at me. "Hi. Hi." He slowly lowered the suitcase. "Are you the owners?" "No." "Caretaker?" "No." "Burglar?" "I made pasta." That doesn't technically answer the question. I held up both hands. "I rented this place." "So did I." "No, you didn't." He reached into his jacket. For one unpleasant second, my body prepared for something dramatic. He pulled out his phone. The screen displayed the cabin. Same photograph. Same address. Same dates. I walked closer. This says Monday through Friday. Yes. So does mine. He looked at my phone. We stood beside each other in the entryway comparing confirmation emails like two men trying to prove ownership of a particularly rustic timeshare. His name was listed as Elias Navarro. Mine said Noah Bennett. Both reservations had been paid. Both had the same check-in instructions. Both emails included the exact lockbox code. Well, he said. That seems bad. Strong assessment. He called the rental company. Voicemail. I called the host number. Voicemail. He tried the platform support line and was told the wait time was approximately 45 minutes. Illy looked around. How many bedrooms? 2. His eyebrows rose. That detail changed the problem. Not completely. But enough. I can find a hotel, he said. There are probably some in town. I passed 2. Good. One had a sign saying no vacancy. Less good. He took off his jacket. Not as a declaration. He draped it over the suitcase while scrolling through his phone. There's a music festival this week. I hadn't known that. Bellwether apparently hosted something called the North Lake Folk Weekend every summer, despite the fact that it was Monday and therefore neither North nor the weekend seemed relevant. Most rooms within 30 miles were booked. The nearest available motel was 42 minutes away. One room remained. Ellie showed me the screen. It had one review. The review consisted entirely of "Do not." I looked at him. He looked at me. I've seen stronger recommendations, I said. That was from the owner. I laughed before I meant to. He smiled. It changed him. Until then, I had been categorizing him entirely as problem entering through door. The smile made that harder. I don't mind sharing the cabin tonight, I said. There are 2 rooms. Ellie studied me. You sure? No. Fair. But it's almost 8, you're already here, we can get the booking mess sorted tomorrow. He nodded. Same. Same what? Not sure but okay. That was how Ali Navarro moved into my vacation. For one night. At least that was the agreement. We established rules over pasta. This was partly because I had made too much, and partly because neither of us knew what else to do. Illy took the smaller bedroom. I kept the room where my bag was already unpacked. We would split kitchen shelves. Either person could change his mind. No guests. No borrowing things without asking. Bathroom schedule negotiable. You make this sound like a peace treaty, Illy said. I manage construction projects. That explains the bullet points. You haven't seen the spreadsheet. There is no spreadsheet. I drank water. He stared. No, there isn't currently a spreadsheet. That is worse. I smiled. Illy told me he was 33 and worked as a freelance photographer. Mostly festivals, live events, small magazines, occasional commercial jobs. The Bellwether trip had not been for work. That surprised me. You're here for vacation too. I attempt one every year. I usually accept a job halfway through. So you're bad at vacations. Professionally. I pointed my fork at him. Then I have one rule to add. No work. Exactly. That's aggressive coming from the man whose laptop is probably 6 feet away. It's in a closet. Secure containment. He told me he had driven 4 hours from Philadelphia. I told him I had come from New York. That's inconvenient, he said. What is? If we end up hating each other, we can't even carpool away. The sentence was harmless. But for some reason, I noticed the if. If we ended up hating each other. Not when. At 9:30, the rental host finally called. Her name was Marcy. She sounded horrified. There had been a synchronization error between 2 booking systems. She apologized approximately 17 times. She could refund one of us immediately. She could not produce another nearby property until Thursday afternoon. Illy and I looked at each other across the kitchen. Marcy asked who would be leaving. Neither of us answered. I covered the phone. You booked this too. So did you. You drove farther. You got here first. This is becoming unnecessarily noble. Illy rubbed his jaw. What if we just stay tonight and decide tomorrow? I should have said no. I had rented 5 days alone. The entire purpose of the trip had been solitude. Instead, I uncovered the phone. We'll stay tonight. Marcy sounded relieved enough to offer both of us a partial refund. After the call, Illy leaned back. Congratulations on your solo vacation. I looked at him. He looked around the cabin. It has gone extremely well. I woke Tuesday to the smell of coffee. For a moment, I didn't remember why that was unusual. Then I heard somebody moving in the kitchen. Illy. I got dressed and found him standing at the counter in a faded gray t-shirt, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched ceramic mugs. He looked over. I made an assumption. That I drink coffee. That anybody voluntarily living in New York drinks coffee. Correct. He handed me a mug. Then our first conflict has been avoided. Morning light came through the kitchen window. Outside, the lake looked flat and silver. Illy had opened the back door. Cool air moved through the room. I took a sip. It was good. Annoyingly good. This is better than mine. I travel with coffee. You brought coffee equipment on vacation. He pointed toward a small hand grinder on the counter. I have standards. You mocked my hypothetical spreadsheet. Coffee is necessary. Organization is a personality defect. We drank in silence for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable. That was the first thing that surprised me. I'm good at silence when I'm alone. Silence with another person usually makes me feel responsible for improving it. With Illy, I didn't. Eventually he said, I'm going into town. For the festival. For food, I didn't bring enough groceries because I assumed the cabin would be near civilization. It is 12 minutes away. That's wilderness to me. I smiled. He picked up his keys. Want anything? No. You sure? Yes. He nodded. Then stood there. I looked at him. What? Do you want to come? The invitation was casual. That shouldn't have mattered. My plan for Tuesday involved reading on the porch and not speaking to anybody. I looked through the open door at the lake. Then at Illy. I thought you were getting groceries. I am. That's not an activity. That sounds like a challenge. I went. Bellwether was the kind of town that had one main street and very strong opinions about flower baskets. Every storefront had one. There was a bakery, a used bookstore, a hardware shop, a small grocery store, 3 restaurants. And because of the festival, approximately 8,000 people carrying canvas tote bags. Illy stopped outside the bakery. Coffee. We just had coffee. That's not an answer. You have a problem. Yes. We went inside. He bought another coffee. I bought a cinnamon roll large enough to require paperwork. We ate outside. Illy had his camera with him. Not the large professional setup I expected. Just a compact black camera hanging from one shoulder. You said no work, I reminded him. This isn't work. You're carrying equipment. You wore shoes, are you working? That argument makes no sense. Neither does yours. He raised the camera toward the street. Not at me. An older couple crossed with matching paper bags from the bakery. A dog sat under a bench waiting patiently while its owner spoke to someone. A child dropped a bright red balloon and 3 adults reacted more dramatically than the child did. Illy photographed moments that didn't appear important until he pointed the camera at them. I watched him. You like people. He lowered the camera. Mostly. You photograph them a lot. People are interesting when they forget they're being observed. That sounds slightly sinister. Occupational hazard. He smiled. What do you photograph? I don't. Ever. Phones count. No. Then no. He looked genuinely confused. You've never wanted to keep something. The question stayed with me longer than it should have. I remember things. Memory is unreliable. So are hard drives. That's why professionals use backups. There it is. What? Work. Illy looked offended. You tricked me. I didn't have to. We continued down the street. At the bookstore, he disappeared into photography. I went to architecture. When I looked up 20 minutes later, he was standing at the end of the aisle holding a book. What? You look less tired. I almost laughed. From books. From yesterday. I was tired yesterday. You looked like somebody had been chasing you. I put the book back. And today. Like you finally noticed they stopped. Nobody had said anything like that to me before. I didn't know what response it required. So I asked whether he was buying the book. He let me change the subject. I noticed that too. That afternoon, we got an email from Marcy. She had found another cabin. Available from Wednesday morning onward. 25 minutes away. Either one of us could transfer there at no additional cost. The solution had arrived. Illy read the message from the opposite side of the kitchen. Well, problem solved. Seems like. We didn't say anything else. I expected him to volunteer. He didn't. I expected myself to. I didn't. Finally, Illy put down his phone. Do you want me to go? There are questions that ask for information. That one asked for honesty. I looked around the cabin. His camera sat on the table. His coffee grinder was beside the sink. A pair of his sneakers was near the door. 24 hours earlier, those objects would have felt like an invasion. Now they look strangely normal. No. The answer came before I could improve it. Illy held my eyes. Okay. You. No. A smile threatened at the corner of his mouth. So we're voluntarily continuing the booking mistake. Apparently. That feels like a poor review. I picked up my phone. I'll tell Marcy we don't need it. Illy leaned against the counter. Noah. Yeah. Thanks. For what? He glanced around. Not making the logical choice. I smiled. Don't get used to it. That night we cooked together. Cooking is too generous a description. We assembled tacos. Illy chopped onions badly. I informed him. He accused me of micromanagement. I took the knife away. He leaned against the counter and watched me finish. You really do manage everything. I know how to chop an onion. You corrected the angle of my knife. You were attacking it. It was an onion, not a historic building. That doesn't mean standards disappear. Illy took a piece of chopped onion from the cutting board. You know what I think? I suspect you'll tell me. I think you're one of those people who makes himself useful so nobody notices when he's exhausted. I stopped cutting. That escalated. Sorry. No. I set down the knife. You're probably right. Illy became quieter. I do the opposite. What? I leave before anyone can expect too much. He looked at the half-cut lime in his hand. My lease is month to month. My jobs change every week. I travel constantly. Every time somebody asks where I live, I give an answer that feels temporary. Do you like that? I used to. And now? He shrugged. I booked 5 days in a cabin and accidentally acquired a roommate. Clearly, I'm experimenting. I smiled. But I remembered what he'd said. I leave before anyone can expect too much. At that point, we had known each other just over 24 hours. It should not have felt important. It did. Wednesday morning, Illy was gone when I woke up. His coffee equipment was still on the counter. His suitcase was still in the bedroom. His car was gone. There was no mystery. He had mentioned the night before that he might drive to a hiking trail north of town. I knew where he was. That didn't stop me from noticing the empty chair across from me. I made coffee. Mine. It was worse. I sat on the porch with a book. Read 4 pages. Went inside. Made breakfast. Returned to the porch. The empty chair remained extremely empty. I told myself this was good. This was what I had booked. A quiet cabin. A lake. Nothing expected of me. At 10:30 my phone buzzed. A work message. I stared at the name on the screen. Then turned the phone face down. 2 minutes later I picked it up. There was another message. I opened neither. Instead I looked toward the gravel drive. That was the moment I understood the problem. I wasn't waiting for work. I was waiting for Illy. And when his car finally appeared just after noon, the relief I felt was disproportionate enough to be embarrassing. He got out carrying a paper bag. Peace offering. For leaving before coffee. He handed it to me. Inside were 2 pastries from the bakery. You didn't need to. I know. That answer was becoming dangerous. We sat on the porch. Illy stretched his legs out. How was solitude? Productive. You read. 4 pages. Impressive. I thought about work. Less impressive. He glanced at me. Did you answer? No. Something like approval passed over his face. Look at you. Don't patronize me. I would never. You are currently doing it. He drank his coffee. I missed this. I looked at him. He seemed to realize what he had said at the same time I did. The porch, he added. Obviously. Very good porch. Exceptional. We both looked at the lake. Neither of us believed ourselves. That afternoon it rained. Not dramatically. Just steady rain that made the forest darker and the cabin feel smaller. We played cards. Illy cheated badly. I won repeatedly. He claimed these facts were unrelated. At 5 the power flickered. At 6 we made soup. At 7 we opened a bottle of wine Illy had bought in town. By 9 the rain had softened enough that we moved to the porch. The roof kept us dry. The lake disappeared into darkness. Illy sat in one chair. I sat in the other. For several minutes we listened to rain hitting leaves. You came here because you wanted 5 days where nobody needed anything from you, he said. I looked over. That sounds familiar. You told me Monday. I didn't realize you were taking notes. Photographer. That's not the same skill. Observation is transferable. He rested the glass against his knee. Was that really why? I considered lying. Not a serious lie. Just the polished version. Yes, work. Illy waited. I sighed. My father got sick last year. His expression changed. I'm sorry. He's okay. I said it quickly. Mostly surgery, recovery, he's back home now. Okay. My sister has 2 kids. She lives closer to him, but she was already doing everything, so I started handling appointments and insurance and contractors when he needed changes at the house. That sounds like a lot. It was manageable. Illy looked at me. I laughed once. That's apparently my favorite word. Apparently. My relationship ended around the same time. Illy didn't interrupt. Not because of my father, not exactly. We had already been going wrong, but there was always something urgent, so I didn't have to think about it. What happened? Daniel got offered a job in Seattle. And I told him he should take it. Did you want him to? I looked out at the dark lake. That was the problem, I didn't know. How long were you together? 5 years. Illy stayed still. 5 years and you didn't know whether you wanted him to stay. I knew I cared about him. That's different. Yes. The word landed softly. He asked whether I would come with him, and I said. I told him I couldn't because of my dad, my work, the apartment, all true. But I was relieved there were reasons. Illy nodded slowly. So you didn't have to say you didn't want to go. Exactly. The rain filled the silence. I've spent the last year making sure everybody is okay, I said, and I'm good at it, that's the annoying part. You make yourself necessary. Probably. So nobody asks what you want. I looked at him. I don't think anyone's preventing me from having opinions. Maybe not. He turned his glass between his fingers. But if you're always solving the next problem, you never have to risk wanting something that isn't practical. It would have annoyed me coming from almost anyone else. From Illy it didn't. Maybe because he had told me his own version the night before. I could say the same thing about you. He smiled slightly. You could. You leave before anything becomes inconvenient. Yes. You make temporary look like freedom. His smile disappeared. Also yes. I hadn't expected agreement. What happened? He watched the rain. I dated a guy named Marcus for almost 2 years. I waited. He had a house in Baltimore, a dog, same gym every Saturday, parents 20 minutes away. Sounds stable. He was. And you? Wasn't. Illy rubbed his thumb against the edge of his glass. He asked me to move in. You said no. I said maybe after summer. What happened after summer? I got a 6-week job in Europe. And after that, Texas, then California. His voice stayed even. Eventually he stopped asking. Did you want to live with him? Illy smiled without humor. I don't know. I recognized the answer. He looked at me. That's not completely true. I think I wanted him. I just didn't want the version of myself I thought I'd have to become to stay. What version? Predictable. That terrible. It used to sound like it. And now? He looked toward the empty road. Now sometimes I land somewhere and realize nobody knows what time I'm arriving. The sentence hurt in a quiet way. Not because it was tragic. Because I understood exactly what he meant. He took a sip of wine. Sorry, that's a lot for Wednesday. You accused me of emotional avoidance while I was chopping onions yesterday. Good point. We've lost all standards. Booking mistake. I smiled. Then Illy looked at me again. Not casually. Something had changed. The porch suddenly felt smaller. You know what else is inconvenient? He asked. What? I like being here with you. I felt my pulse change. I could have joked. I almost did. Instead I said, I like you being here. Illy's eyes stayed on mine. Neither of us moved. The rain had almost stopped. He set his glass down. For a second I thought he might come closer. I wanted him to. The realization arrived cleanly enough that I couldn't explain it away. Then his phone vibrated on the table. He glanced down. The moment broke. Not badly. Just enough. He turned the phone over without reading the message. Tomorrow, he said, I'm going to the north side of the lake. Photography. Technically vacation. Dangerous. Want to come? This time I didn't pretend to consider it. Yes. Thursday felt different because neither of us could claim logistics anymore. We had solved the booking problem. We had groceries. We had separate plans available. And we spent the day together anyway. Illy drove. The north side of the lake had a trail that followed the shoreline through pine trees and opened onto a small public beach. The festival crowd hadn't reached it. For most of the morning, we saw only a few hikers. Illy took photographs. Trees. Water. An abandoned blue canoe pulled on a shore. At one point, he turned the camera toward me. I immediately raised a hand. No. Why? I don't like photographs. You haven't seen this one. You haven't taken it. Exactly. I kept walking. He followed. Why don't you like them? I look strange. Everybody says that. Maybe everybody looks strange. Possible. We reached a clearing. Sunlight came through the trees. Illy stopped. Just one. No. I won't post it. No. I won't even show you. Then what's the point? He lowered the camera. To keep something. The words echoed our conversation in town. I looked at him. He wasn't teasing. What? You asked whether I'd ever wanted to keep something. I remember. You're very committed to callbacks. Occupational hazard. I stood there for another second. Then sighed. One. Illy lifted the camera. Don't pose. I don't know how. Perfect. I looked toward the lake. He took the photograph. One click. That was painless, he said. Delete it. No. You're a terrible roommate. We voluntarily renewed. At the beach, we took off our shoes and sat near the water. Illy rolled up his jeans. I told him the lake was probably freezing. He walked in anyway. 2 minutes later, he admitted I was right. I laughed hard enough that he splashed water at me. I retaliated. This escalated with the maturity expected from men in their 30s. By the time we stopped, the bottoms of my jeans were soaked. Illy's shirt was wet. We sat on the shore drying in the sun. He looked at me. What? Nothing. You're doing photographer face. I have a face. You get quiet before you take pictures. I'm not holding the cameras. Then what are you looking at? He answered without hesitation. You. The word sat between us. I looked at his mouth. Then back at his eyes. Illy noticed. He moved closer but slowly. Noah. Yeah. Can I kiss you? There was nothing complicated about the answer. Yes. His hand touched the side of my face. Warm. Careful. He gave me enough time to move away. I didn't. The first kiss was brief. Almost cautious. When he pulled back, we were still close enough that I could feel him smile. That okay? Yes. Good. I kissed him again. Longer this time. Still gentle. No audience. No music. Just water moving against the shore and Illy's fingers lightly touching my jaw. When we separated, I laughed. He looked concerned. What? Nothing. That didn't sound like nothing. I booked this trip to avoid people. Strong execution. I hate you. That feels inconsistent with recent evidence. I kissed him again. We did not suddenly behave like people who had known each other for years. That mattered. On the walk back, there were moments of awkwardness. Our hands brushed twice before Lee finally said, "This is ridiculous," and held mine. I smiled. What? Nothing. You're terrible at nothing. So are you. At the cabin, we changed out of damp clothes. Separately, we made dinner. We kissed once in the kitchen when neither of us had a useful reason to. Then we sat on the porch. The ease of it was what frightened me. Not the kiss. Not attraction. Those were simple. The dangerous part was that I could imagine another Thursday. Not this exact Thursday. A normal one. Illy in my kitchen. Me complaining about his coffee equipment. Both of us having places to be the next morning. The cabin had created a temporary life. Tomorrow we'd leave it. Around 10, Ellie said, "What are you thinking?" "Nothing." He stared at me. "Sorry, habit." I noticed. I looked toward the lake. "Tomorrow." "Yeah." "You're going back to Philadelphia." "For a week." "A week." "I have a job in Chicago next Friday." Something tightened inside me. "How long?" 10 days. "Then." "Denver." I nodded. There it was. The part of Italy that had existed before me. Airports. Hotels. Jobs. Motion. He looked at me carefully. "You got quiet." "I know." "What?" I almost said nothing. Instead, "I'm trying to decide whether this only works because we're here." Ellie's face changed. "Okay." That wasn't an accusation. "I know. I don't want to turn 5 days into some enormous thing." "Neither do I. But I also don't want to pretend it didn't happen." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "Those aren't the only two options." "What are the others?" "We go on a date." I blinked. "When?" "When I'm back." "That's almost 3 weeks." "Yes." "You travel constantly." "Yes." "You live in another city." "Yes." "You're making a poor argument." "I know." He smiled faintly. "Noah, I'm not asking you to plan Christmas. It's July." See, already setting boundaries. I laughed despite myself. Ellie became serious again. "I don't know what this becomes." "Neither do I. But I know I want to find out." That was all. No promise that distance didn't matter. No declaration that love would solve scheduling. Just, "I want to find out." For someone like me, it was almost frighteningly reasonable. "I do too," I said. Ellie sat back. "Good. That's your entire response." "I had a speech, but you agreed early." "Terrible planning." "I'm learning from you." Friday morning arrived offensively bright. We packed. The cabin slowly stopped looking shared. His coffee grinder disappeared into a bag. My books returned to mine. 2 sets of shoes became 1. The refrigerator emptied. At 10, both suitcases stood beside the front door. I hated that image. Ellie noticed me looking. Very dramatic. I didn't say anything. Your face did. Photographer. Exactly. We checked every room. Closed the windows. Turned off the lights. I stood on the porch one last time. Ellie came out behind me. The vacation work. I considered it. My inbox probably contains a small fire. Not the question. I looked at him. Yes. He smiled. Mine too. You worked. I took 12 minutes of client calls Wednesday. Disqualified. Harsh. He stepped closer. When are you back in New York? Today. I know, I meant after any upcoming trips. I don't have one. Of course you don't. What does that mean? Nothing. You've learned nothing. He kissed me. A short goodbye kiss. Then another because the first one felt too much like punctuation. When we separated, he rested his forehead lightly against mine. Text me when you get home. You're the one driving 4 hours. Still, I will. We locked the cabin, put the key back in the box, then stood beside our cars. Mine pointed toward New York, his toward Pennsylvania. This is the part where one of us should say something memorable, Ailey said. I don't perform under pressure. I've noticed. I opened my car door. Drive safe. You too. I got inside, started the engine, then looked through the windshield. Illy was still standing beside his car. I rolled down the window. What? He lifted his phone. Saturday. What Saturday? The one after Denver. You're asking me out from a parking lot. Yes. 3 weeks early. I'm experimenting with planning. I smiled. Saturday. He grinned. Good. We drove away in opposite directions. Back in my apartment, everything looked exactly as I had left it. Laptop in bag. Mail beneath the door. A plant Rachel had threatened me not to kill. The city outside my windows. My phone contained 43 work notifications. I ignored them for 15 minutes. Progress. At 6:30, Lee texted. Home to you. I replied. Home. Then. Coffee here is terrible. 3 dots. That sounds like a personal problem. I smiled. For the next 3 weeks, we talked more than either of us admitted we would. Not continuously. That would have made it easier to dismiss as novelty. We talked around our actual lives. Illy sent photographs from Chicago. Not landmarks. A lonely chair outside a diner. Morning light hitting a motel curtain. A man walking 3 dogs of radically different sizes. I sent him pictures of things I thought he would find amusing. A construction drawing with an impossible staircase. My coffee. A mug he described as architecturally hostile. We called twice. Then 4 times. One night he called from Denver while I was making dinner. We stayed on the phone for 40 minutes. Nothing important happened. That was what made it important. Saturday arrived. He was taking the train to New York. Our date was at 7. At 4:30 my doorbell rang. I frowned. Too early. The building intercom showed a delivery driver. Downstairs there was a flat cardboard envelope with my name on it. No return address I recognized. Inside was a photograph. Me. At the lake. The picture Ali had taken after I finally agreed. I was standing in the clearing, looking toward the water. Not smiling. Not posing. But I looked peaceful. I almost didn't recognize myself. There was writing on the back. 2 words. Saturday, E. I laughed. My phone rang. Ellie. I answered. You mailed me a photograph asking about a date we already scheduled. I wanted redundancy. That's my thing. I'm adapting. You know you're arriving in 2 hours. Yes. And this could have arrived yesterday. Yes. This is wildly inefficient. Noah. What? Do you like the picture? I looked at it again. At the man standing beside the lake. He did look less tired. Yes. There was a pause. Good. I sat on the edge of my couch. Ellie. Yeah. Saturday works. He laughed. I was hoping. At 7:03, somebody knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, Ellie stood in the hallway. No suitcase. No camera bag. No booking confirmation. Just a dark jacket, a small smile, and 2 coffee cups. I looked at them. You brought coffee to an evening date. I know what you drink. That landed harder than it should have. I took one. Where are we going? Restaurant 7 blocks away. You made a reservation. Last Tuesday. I stared at him. Who are you? I'm trying something. I stepped into the hallway and locked the door. What? He held out his hand. Staying long enough to make plans. I looked at it. Then at him. I took his hand. That sounds dangerous. So I've heard. We walked toward the elevator. I didn't know where the relationship would go. Ellie still had jobs in other cities. I still had an inbox full of problems I was dangerously good at solving. There would be distance. Schedules. Bad timing. Ordinary disappointments. The cabin had not fixed either of us. That wasn't what happened. It had simply removed enough noise for 5 days that I could hear myself want something. And this time, instead of immediately looking for the practical reason not to want it, I walked downstairs with him. 3 weeks earlier, a stranger had opened the door to the cabin I rented because a booking system made a mistake. By every reasonable measure, one of us should have left. Neither of us did. For once, staying had been the less logical choice. It was also the one I was happiest I made.